The Japanese do something in the first 3 years of a child's life that most Western parents have never heard of. It doesn't require flashcards, enrichment classes, or a single piece of educational technology. It requires something that looks, from the outside, almost like nothing at all. And researchers found that this nothing was producing measurable differences in prefrontal cortex development, emotional regulation, and long-term cognitive resilience that persisted well into adolescence. This is not a parenting trend. This is a structural difference in how an entire culture has approached the infant brain for generations. And the science finally caught up to explain why it works. For decades, the dominant Western framework was stimulation-based. More input equals more development. Richer environments, more language exposure, more novel objects, more interaction. Parents absorbed this without knowing it. It is why the toy industry is a $90 billion global market. It is why the average parent fills their child's environment with more sensory input per waking hour than any generation before them. And researchers kept finding something that didn't fit. Children in Japan, raised in quieter, less object-saturated environments with significantly less direct verbal instruction in infancy, were consistently outperforming their Western counterparts on measures of executive function and sustained attention by school age. The stimulation model had no clean answer, so researchers went looking for one. What they found was a concept so embedded in Japanese parenting culture that most Japanese parents don't have a name for it. Researchers gave it one: kan-saatsu, observation without intervention. Watching a child struggle, explore, fail, and try again without immediately moving to help, correct, or redirect. Not neglect, presence without interference. And the distinction is neurologically significant. Here is what happens inside the brain when a child encounters a problem they cannot immediately solve. The prefrontal cortex activates and attempts to generate a solution. If the solution comes from outside before that process completes, the brain receives the answer, but does not build the pathway. Researchers at Kyoto University found that children allowed to reach their own solutions showed significantly stronger prefrontal activation patterns than children who received adult intervention within the first 30 seconds of difficulty. 30 seconds. That is the window most Western parents never let close. Kan-saatsu is a cultural technology for keeping that window open. The second layer is harder to translate. Japanese mothers engage in a practice of narrating emotional states rather than directing behavior. When a Western parent sees a toddler frustrated with a puzzle, the instinct is to redirect. Try it this way. Here, let me show you. When a Japanese mother sees the same moment, she is more likely to say something closer to, "That piece doesn't want to go there yet, does it?" The language is not instructional. It is reflective. It names what the child is experiencing without solving it. Researchers found this was building something specific. A 2021 study in developmental psychology examined mother-infant interaction patterns across Japanese and American families and found that Japanese mothers were significantly more likely to use internal state language, words referencing the child's inner experience rather than outer behavior. The children of mothers who used this language at higher rates showed accelerated development on theory of mind tasks at ages 3, 4, and 5. The language was building the architecture, theory of mind, the ability to understand that other people have thoughts, feelings, and perspectives separate from your own. Researchers now believe it begins not in preschool, not in sibling relationships, but in the first 2 years of life, in how a parent responds to an infant's emotional signals. Name the feeling without fixing it, and you are building one of the most important cognitive capacities a human being will ever develop. The third layer is where Japanese philosophy most directly challenges Western instincts. It is rooted in a concept called mimamoru, protecting by watching. The idea that a child's most important developmental work happens not during structured activity, but during unstructured time when no one is directing, enriching, or optimizing. Time that looks from the outside like boredom. Researchers at the University of Colorado found that children with more unscheduled time showed significantly stronger self-directed executive function, the ability to set their own goals, manage their own attention, and regulate their own behavior without external scaffolding. The children given space to be bored had built the capacity to manage themselves. The children whose time was continuously structured were significantly more dependent on external structure to function. The moments that feel like parenting failures, the afternoon with nothing planned, the hour when the child is wandering the house doing something you can't quite categorize, those are not gaps in your parenting. They are the parenting. The hours when the brain builds regulatory infrastructure that no curriculum can build for it. Japanese parents have known this for generations, not in neuroscientific language, but in practice. And researchers who went looking for why their children showed stronger executive function and more resilient attention systems found it hiding in plain sight, in the watching without fixing, in the naming without solving, in the boredom that is not empty, but full of invisible work. Your child does not need more input. They need more of your trust. Trust that the struggle is the point. Trust that the silence is productive. Trust that a brain working slowly through something difficult is doing more than a brain that never has to work at all. That is not a Japanese idea. That is what the data keeps finding across laboratories, cultures, and generations. They simply built a way of life around it before the research arrived to explain why. If this changed how you think about what your child actually needs, leave a comment below.